It's not often I start the pod incredibly jealous where our guests are or one of my co-hosts, but today I am as we start the On the Whistle podcast in Rabat, the capital of Morocco. My name is Zayn Nabbi. I'm in London, and today we're giving you a WAFCON final preview. But Alistair Howorth, one of our co-hosts, you're in Rabat. You've got that wonderful hat on. You're sitting in the shade. I mean, you're living your best life, clearly.
Zayn, it's a good time here. I mean, living my best life. I'm running on a few hours sleep ahead of the tournament, as is always the joys. I'm here having my morning coffee in the cafe in Rabat,
Beautiful.
and it's a beautiful sunny day and beautiful weather for some WAFCON football.
Absolutely. And if you've been living under a rock, the biggest football tournament on the planet is taking place, and the final this weekend. It's going to be Morocco versus Nigeria. Yeah, I'm throwing some shade on the Euros because we know the Women's Africa Cup of Nation is very much our priority here on the Whistle. And we're going to dedicate some time to talk about it, the teams, how this is a grudge match, and how this was a game Nigeria lost in the last AFCON in the semis. So they want vengeance. How historic this win could be for Morocco, given that the Atlas Lionesses have been on an upward trajectory in their football. There's also the fact that Jorge Vilda, the disgraced former Spanish coach who was an ally of Luis Rubiales, is coaching the Moroccan team. We'll get into that and his appointment a little bit as we go on. And of course, we've got to go to the viewer comments and start with there, Alistair. And let me say to all our community out there, thank you so much for all the views. Thank you for engaging. This is what we ask for. We love to hear whether you agree, disagree, or what you think of us. And I know, Alistair, you're sitting there in Orlando Pirates jersey, so a lot of people think you're South African. So I'm going to let you handle this in a second. But we had some great interaction to your semi-final review of the WAFCON, and I want to read some comments out to you. And we had Victor Cobham say, "What is this analysis? It's a eulogy of excuses for Banyana Banyana from a dedicated Banyana fanboy. Bro, you should really sit down and listen to yourself in this clip again." We had Isaac Kenny say, "You are sad your team lost." We had Ogan Leakeni say, "Dear Ashleigh," and this was on the Ashleigh Plumptre interview we did, "I pray your dream comes true this Saturday." Obviously hoping for a Super Falcons win. And finally, we had another comment from our audience out there where one of our loyal viewers said, George Okwana said, "This man, as you, Alistair, is talking like a fan, not a journalist," smiley face. It's obvious he wanted South Africa to win. We then had a Jay Olawale response saying, "Brother, you got it wrong. The man predicted Nigeria to win the match in his earlier predictions before the match." We then had Vic Ben say he is South African before Victor Cobham said, before George Aquina said, "That explains it." Well, Ali, let me ask you the first question because you're sitting there in a pirate shirt. Are you South African?
Let me tell you, I wore the wrong shirt today. I didn't know any of these comments happened, so it's all news to me. For those who don't know, I'm not South African. I've only been South Africa once in my life when I was 10 years old, and I hardly remember it. And in fact, my only memories of South Africa was my mom's purse being stolen in Cape Town. So I'm certainly no shill for South African football. What I will say is I think for some of them who had watched earlier the previews of the semifinals, they'll know that I predicted Nigeria to win. I think it's quite funny hearing all of that because I think both things can be true, right? I think Nigeria deserved to win. I think they were the better team, and I think I got that across. But I think it's also important to highlight a lot of the advantages they had, benefits they had, particularly against South Africa. They had 2 days extra training, and they, obviously South Africa had to deal with the horrible situation of Gabriela Salgado getting injured. And, something clearly upset them, clearly upset the Nigerian players. They were all in floods of tears and hugely emotional response. But no, I'm not South African, nor did I want South Africa to win. I'm very happy for Nigeria to win, and I'm very excited to see them in the final.
Ali, I'm glad you addressed that off the top. And for those of you who are wondering where Alistair from, he's Kenyan. So you got to hate on the Kenyans. Because I can tell you, uh, in fact, maybe it's because of my South African flavors rubbing off on you, Ali, that you now are coming across as a Banyana fan. But your analysis is always very fair. It's very good. But for those of you listening out there, thank you for the comments. Like, we love to hear from you, right? So keep posting on YouTube if you consume here, or whatever podcast platform you're on, Apple, Spotify, etc. We'll weave this into our shows because you, our community, are vital to this. And of course, you can find us at OTW_podcast on X, on Instagram, and TikTok. And just search for the On the Whistle podcast on Facebook and YouTube. Please like, please subscribe, please consuming and keeping the conversation flowing. We are Africa's biggest braai. Ali, you're in Rabat. We have to get started with our WAFCON preview now. I know you spent some time, shock and horror, with the Super Falcons yesterday. What's the latest coming out of their camp?
Yeah, good thing the Super Falcons players didn't watch our podcast, otherwise maybe they would have refused to speak to me. No, yeah, last night went into the Nigeria team hotel, spoke to a couple players. They were in good spirits. I think one thing that really strikes you with the Super Falcons team is far more than at the 2022 AFCON or the 2023 World Cup, is there's a real sense of togetherness in this team, a real sense of purpose, a real sense of drive, and I think that is born out of this conversation that the team had ahead of the tournament. They got together, independent of the coaching staff, independent of the NFF, and said, look, we know we haven't been paid. We know we're owed money that dates back to 2023, and I think even going back to 2021 for some of the players. But we're going to put that to the side for this tournament. We're gonna put all that noise to the side, and we're gonna focus. We're gonna lock in and kind of drive towards this Mission X, getting that 10th title. And that has been so present throughout this tournament. I mean, Ashleigh Plumptre spoke about it ahead of the tournament when we interviewed her on the pod. Osinachi spoke about it yesterday when I asked her about it. There's such a sense of togetherness in this team. There's such a sense of unity and cohesion in this team. And I think that really comes across. It really drives them forward in a way that they definitely didn't have in 2022. So I think coming into the final, they're in a very good place in terms of their preparation. You know, they had to travel from Casablanca to Rabat, but you know, it's only about an hour and a half, so it's not far. So you know, they've been able to prepare well, and I think they're in a good place coming into this final.
We know that when you interviewed Ashleigh Plumptre in the build-up to the final was a fantastic interview on the eve of the tournament. She spoke honestly about wanting to come and avenge that Moroccan semi-final loss. I mean, I think there were 9 players left on the field when they lost that semi-final, and I think what you describe as one of the best, if not the best, atmospheres you've attended in football. I mean, like, you know, a lot of teams don't like to admit that they want to get one up on another, but it's clear that, you know, they want to win the 10th title, they want to win the Decima, but it's also about righting the wrongs of what happened in the past AFCON, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that semi-final will live long in my memory. Certainly, it was an amazing atmosphere. You know, smoke bombs, flares. You know, Ashleigh spoke about how amazing it was having 50,000 Moroccans booing her every touch, whistling her every pass. And I think there is a real sense of wanting to get revenge. You know, I think they felt that there was huge injustice done to them in that semi-final. Obviously, both Rashida Ajibade and Halimatu Ayinde both got sent off in that game, and they still pushed them to penalties. They almost even won in extra time thanks to Gift Monday, but there is that sense of revenge. There's no doubt about it. This is the one team they always wanted to play, and I think if they did it, it would cap off this incredible redemption arc for Nigeria, because the last WAFCON, that was their lowest point as a country in terms of women's football, because prior to that, they had won 9 out of 11 titles in the WAFCON. The only 2 others they didn't win, they still got medals. I think they came 3rd in both those ones that Equatorial Guinea won. So this, in 2022, it was the first time they'd ever lost more than 1 game at a WAFCON, because they lost to Banyana in the group stage, they lost to Morocco in the semi-finals, and they lost to Zambia in the round in the 3rd place playoff. And it was the first time they'd never medaled at WAFCON. And so at this tournament, they've been on this incredible redemption arc, because they beat Zambia in the quarterfinals. They beat South Africa in the semifinals, and now they might, if they beat Morocco, they'll have beaten the one team that really had the hoodoo over the Morocco, because that's the team, like I said, like you mentioned, that they really wanted to play. That's the one team they wanted to play. They want to be in a hostile environment again. They want the Moroccans to be doing them, hating them, and all this because they want to get that revenge. So it really would be this, amazing accomplishment for them, and the fact that it would be their 10th title, it would be a true reassertion of Nigerian dominance on the continent.
Alistair, great breakdown on the mindset that's surrounding Nigeria. But let's put our lens on Morocco a little bit. I mean, this is the success story in many ways on the African continent, on how, in many aspects, the Moroccan Federation has invested in their women's game. They've put a lot of money into professionalizing the leagues. The Atlas Lionesses are competitive in the continent. They're also, did reasonably well at the last Women's World Cup. And what I think is interesting is now they're on the cusp of winning their first women's title. What would this do for women's football in Morocco if they were to be successful in Rabat on Saturday night?
It's a good question, because what it would do for Moroccan football. I think they're already doing everything they can for Moroccan women's football. For those who don't know, the investment from the Moroccan Federation has been incredible in the last 5 years. I think genuinely no country in the world can compete in terms of the transformation that's happened here. In 2020 they instituted what they call the Plan Marshall, the Marshall Plan for women's football in Morocco, and they started investing. I think prior to that, their budget for Moroccan women's football was about 600,000 for all Moroccan dollars for all Moroccan football, women's football. They increased it overnight to 65 million. That is the level of investment that is coming into this team. That is the level of investments coming into this league. Every single team in the top two divisions of Moroccan women's football are subsidized and funded by the federation. They're, along with England and the US, the only country in the world to have two fully professional divisions of football. Yes, it's not professional in terms of the standard yet, but in terms of the way it's run, the logistics, the structure, it is incredible. But I think what they are missing, which they got partially in that 22 tournament, was this kind of sense of national pride, the sense of accomplishment, and kind of drive to make women's football front and center. Because I think in Morocco, they love football, they love their national teams, they love everything to do with this country, and so they love the Atlas Lionesses. But do they love women's football? I'm not convinced they do yet. They're still not the same kind of interest that you get in Nigeria and Cameroon and some of these West African countries. And so I think for them, winning the WAFCON would be a huge, huge statement, because, you're going up against a team that has absolutely dominated this sport for decades and decades. They've had a head start in Nigeria over everyone because of their, own footballing infrastructure that was there in the 80s when they first created a national team ahead of the 1991 World Cup. But for Morocco, within the space of really 4 years to catch up to Nigeria, who had a 30-year head start, that would be a huge statement in itself. And I think it would signal kind of real shift of power in terms of women's football in Africa. So I think it would be huge if they won it as well.
Before we get to the actual predictions and sort of players to watch and where the final would be won, I know, Ali, you would be a close consumer of my social platforms. And I've been very outspoken in recent days over the presence of one Jorge Vilda as the Moroccan coach. Vilda was an associate and close ally of Luis Rubiales, who was the former president of the Spanish Football Federation, who was found guilty of sexual assault for planting his unsolicited kiss on Jenny Hermoso's lips after the Women's World Cup final in 2023. There was a huge fallout over it. It was football's Me Too moment. And, what came out in the wash was that Vilda lost his job. And, after it had come out that Hermoso was unhappy and the team was unhappy with Luis Rubiales, Vilda was seen as openly supporting Rubiales at an assembly meeting where he cheered very loudly for him and clapped. It's worth mentioning that a year before that World Cup success, 15 players in the Spanish squad did not want to play for Vilda, as they had cited coaching issues, issues around treatment. And he is somebody that was part of what is very clearly a systemically sexist and misogynistic regime at the time in Spanish football. But he landed quite quickly in Morocco, taking up one of the premier jobs on the continent at a time when no one in Europe or North America would give the man a job. So I think, and I've said before on my social media accounts, it's at Zayn Nabbi, nice and easy, that we spit in the faces of our mothers, our wives, our daughters, our nieces by having him coach in our football. He has no place in it. I've said that it's going to be a black eye on the final when he gets to the podium, either as the winner or the runners up. And I just think we can do better, and we shouldn't be a dumping ground for Europe. And I would hope Morocco would literally hold his appointment before they brought him in. And it just concerns me that nobody is really talking about this on the ground at the WAFCON. So that's my monologue, Ali. And feel free to disagree or have it take a different perspective. But what's your reading on it?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a huge, huge shame because, yeah, like I said, Vilda was cleared of his association with Rubiales in terms of supporting him. But like you said, the players even before that wanted to strike because the environment he created clearly, like you said, a systemic environment of misogyny. And I think it's really disappointing to be honest because, I think oftentimes we see African football as, like you said, almost a dumping ground for Europe. We often talk about plumbers and these rejected European coaches who haven't done well coming to Africa and being given gigs. And I think, yeah, we should hold ourselves to higher standards. I don't mean we should hold ourselves to the same standards of Europe. I mean higher. Why are we comparing ourselves to Europe when we could be better? And I think it does send the wrong statement because, let's not forget the reason why Morocco are investing so much in their women's football. It's not just to be successful on the pitch. It's because they want to show the world that this is a progressive country or more progressive, that they're balancing this out with the conservative part of this country, that it's a place where women can thrive. That is a huge part of it. Morocco have been very upfront about it. And so hiring someone who is known for creating a systemic environment of misogyny is not the way to go about it. And it's not just Europe's second-hand coaches. We've seen recently that Jerry Shabalala, who obviously was tremendously successful with Mamelodi Sundowns, women's team winning a couple CAF Champions Leagues, he was then suspended from Mamelodi Sundowns after there was allegations made about him in terms of improper conduct, and he's now gotten a job here at Sporting Casablanca, in one of the big women's clubs here in Morocco. So it says a lot, I think, about the federation, the country, the approach. Because let's be fair, they have done so much in terms of improving the living standards. The prominence of women in society. They have improved here in Morocco, but this is not the right message sending this. And it kind of what the message it's sending is Jorge Vilda is a great coach, and that's all that matters. Whereas if your message is that women should be empowered, are safe, etc., in a country that still has huge issues around the mistreatment of women, both systemically and practically, then sending the message that actually, the treatment of women isn't the priority, that the priority is success, I think it does send the wrong message. And I think it's a huge shame. And I also want to point out that CAF have been not promoting that, but have been abetting it in many ways, because at press conferences we're not allowed to ask questions about it.
What do
When
you mean you're not allowed to ask questions?
if you try to ask a question about Jorge Vilda or about the Nigerian players being paid or any issue, the CAF media officer will immediately shut it down and will say, we're not taking questions on that. We're not letting you speak on that. So there's no way for the media to hold any of these people to account. And I think for me, that is what is slightly scary. There's no way to hold this to account. And the reality is most Moroccans aren't aware of Jorge Vilda. The reality is most, even journalists, they don't know this background. All they know is he's the World Cup winning coach, so he's an amazing
Mm.
coach. And even that in of itself is really, really concerning for me.
Yeah, no, that is a big concern. And to put in context, Jerry Shabalala, highly successful at Mamelodi Sundowns, but was suspended by Sundowns for alleged improper conduct. Some of the reports coming out from there suggesting that he was making sexually suggestive comments to his players, and also refusing to leave the change room when some of them were naked. So some really concerning things that were coming out of Sundowns, but to the credit of the club, they've dealt with it. And one would have hoped that the new team that he's joined in Casablanca, which is Sporting Club Casablanca, they would have been aware of all of this and thought through whether they wanted this guy to be associated with their team because of his suspension by Sundowns. But we can only hope by talking about these things, Alistair, that there's an information flow and that people can go out there and do their research and make their own minds up if they want the likes of Vilda and Shabalala involved in their football, despite the successes these coaches might have had, on the field. To bring it back, and I know this is quite a pivot to the final, because I want to definitely give it its love and give the players their kudos and obviously get a prediction from you. But if you were to predict, or before you get your predictions, if you were to tell people out there who are watching the final, this is the one or two players from the Super Falcons you need to watch. These are the two players from the Atlas Lionesses you need to watch, and who will decide the game or dictate the game. Who would you say the key characters and figures are where this game will ultimately be won or lost?
I think it's an interesting question because it's actually for Nigeria it's very hard because this is not a team of individuals. This is a team of that has really operated as a team and have been excellent. I think their defense has been their strongest point. They've only conceded one goal at this tournament to Banyana, and that was a penalty. And so I think their defense is what really makes them strong. So Michel Alozie and Ashleigh Plumptre, superb fullbacks, and Osinachi Ohale and Oluwatosin Demehin have both been superb at centre back. And of course, they've got the best goalkeeper in Africa, Chiamaka Ndozie, behind them. But I think going forward, the real standout for them this tournament so far has been Esther Okoronkwo, one of these players who's based in the US and then WSI, I think at Toronto. So Canada, not technically the US. She has been really the standout. She didn't make the team in 2022, but since breaking into the side, she's been electric. She's really powerful, really strong, very quick. But what she really has that's kind of impressed me is kind of calmness in front of goal. I think particularly the goal she scored against Zambia, where she chests the ball under pressure on inside the box and kind of then volleys it home. She's really, really talented, and I think that is where Nigeria are going to get a lot of joy through that direct attack with her and Chinwende Ihezuhu. They in both play up front and on the left wing, so they kind of swap all the time, and it's a lot of movement, it's a lot of changing players, what positions they're in. So I think that's kind of where Nigeria's strength is. With Morocco, there is a bit more reliance on individuals, I think. I think you look at the captain, Ghislaine Chabak, she's the star of this team. She scored 4 goals, the top goal scorer at the tournament. She was the player of the tournament in 2022. She is a delightful set piece, brilliant finisher, loves an effort from distance, and is also kind of the creative heartbeat of this team. So I think for me, she's obviously the one to watch. But I think what's made Morocco a lot better this time than they were in 22 is the introduction of their centre forward, Tassim Jaidi. She's, I think, been the top goal scorer in the Saudi Women's League in the last 2 seasons. Used to play at Asfar Rabat with Shabak, but she has been excellent as well this tournament. So I think for me, from a Moroccan perspective, those two are the ones to watch. They're the danger women.
So it's going to be prediction time now, Ali. From my side, I just can't see Nigeria losing this. I think they've come in. I think they've shown how resolute they are. I think, what a statement over Zambia with that win in the quarters, 5-0. They then put away my beloved Banyana, and they've had a hard run to the final, but they're a team that can do it. Morocco a little softer on their side of the draw. Yes, they'll have the home crowd. Yes, they've got some incredible talent like you've spoken about. And there's intellectual capital there that can win the game from a coaching perspective. But I got to believe that Nigeria win their 10th and have a lot to celebrate very shortly. I mean, would you disagree? Do you think it's a bit tighter than that? I can see Nigeria winning 2-0. That would be my prediction.
Yeah, I think from the start of this tournament, or at least that since the end of the group stage, what I've said is Nigeria are the best team at this tournament, but Morocco are my favourites because what we mentioned about having that easier draw and being at home. Now, the semi-finals and quarterfinals, I think maybe Nigeria have even shown more. Particularly in the semi-final, I think they dug really deep against Banyana. But I think with Nigeria, we've seen this very, very clear pattern that they come out flying out of the blocks always. So aggressive, so attacking in the first 5-10 minutes. And if they score early, they'll blow you away. That's what they did against Zambia. That's what they did against Tunisia. If they don't, though, they do really struggle. And we saw that against Banyana. They absolutely smashed them in the first 10-15 minutes. Should have been maybe 2 or 3 goals up. But because they didn't score, Banyana grew into the game. And I would say after those first 15-20 minutes, Banyana probably were slightly the better team. And Nigeria, even though they didn't look super shaky defensively because they're so good defensively, is they didn't really have much going forward. They weren't an attacking threat as much as South Africa, and their goal came from almost a bit of fortune because Alozier's cross was kind of perfectly in that kind of channel where everyone went for it, no one got it. They're not a very creative team, and so I think it will be interesting to see how they approach this game because Morocco, I think, will equally be up for it in terms of coming out the block because they've got that home crowd. Now, having said that, they were really poor in that first half against Ghana. Ghana were by far the better team. They could have been 2 or 3-0 up at halftime, but Morocco rode it out. They got to penalties, and they are excellent penalty-taking team. I will say that, and that's so. The longer the game goes on for me, the more and more Morocco becomes favourites. Just as it was in the South Africa game, the more Morocco can hang in there, the more they're going to. I think Nigeria are the favourites, and for good reason. But I think it is too close to call. I think I'll respect my earlier call and stick with it because my earlier call was that Nigeria would get to the final because of the toll it took playing Zambia, playing South Africa, that they will not get it done. So I think if I had to make a prediction, I think Morocco will win it on penalties as they did against Nigeria in the semi-finals.
Wow, Ali. Um, well, I'm sure that's going to make you more popular with the Super
Yeah,
Falcons fan
exactly.
when Nigeria wins.
Looking forward to it, Zayn. Oh my goodness.
Ali, it's
just
been a
just
pleasure.
just telling you all right now, Zayn, I'm not Moroccan. I'm not Moroccan. I have no affiliation with this country. Just want everyone to know that.
Well, Ali, but before I let you go, because I know you've got a busy day ahead of you, what has your overall impressions been of the WAFCON? Like, you've attended past ones, you're at this one. I mean, we can probably get into this in the pod post the final, but how have you enjoyed this tournament? I know you've been on the ground, maybe not as long as our women's football editor for those Munda, but you've been there from the knockouts. What have your impressions been?
Yeah, I think from the football, it's been really good. The superstars really showed up for this tournament. I really loved that, particularly the group stage. It was all about Banda, Kundananji, Shabak, even Oshwala, who's had a bad tournament, scored, and it's kind of been about the emergence of some of these stars as well as some of the big names really performing, which we didn't really get in 2022. So I think I really enjoyed that. I think off the pitch, I think it's been a touch disappointing in many ways. In 2022, at the beginning of the tournament, there was not much interest. If you spoke to your average Moroccan, they would have said, "Oh, we have a women's national team. I didn't even know. Oh, there's a WAFCON going on. I didn't even know that." But by the end, it was this huge swell of interest, passion, joy, celebration. This tournament, maybe it's partially because I've been in Casablanca more than Rabat. Whereas last tournament I was almost exclusively in Rabat, where the Moroccan national team has been based. But there hasn't been the same level of interest from the Moroccan public, and I think for me that's been a disappointment. And that's why I said earlier, this is a team the country that loves football, loves their country. But they don't love women's football yet. And I think that has been clear to see. So that's a bit disappointing, as well as the fact that I think because they're looking towards the men's AFCON in December and the World Cup in 2030, this tournament has felt like a bit of a forgotten piece. And that is in part because of Morocco, it's in part because of CAF. This is a tournament coming a year after it was meant to and competing with the Euros for attention. So I think in many ways the logistics of it have been really disappointing. And I think that has been frustrating. And then the fact that, South Africa have been playing in Wijda and Berkane, some of these other teams playing in Berkane, way out on the fringes of this country. Whereas last WAFCON it was Casablanca and Rabat. The way the games were staggered, you could go to every single game virtually, and you haven't had that this tournament. Even the quarterfinals and semifinals, I could only attend one quarterfinal. I could only attend one semifinal. because of the way it was scheduled. So from that side of things, that has been disappointing. I think logistically, in terms of access to training grounds, resources, and hotels and stuff, it's been great. It's been fine. There's been no issue.
Sure. And look, we know the men's tournament is going to be staged in December, January. So, if you're Moroccan or North African, you can have great access to top quality football in your summer, in your winter. It's going to be amazing. And Ali, we certainly wish you well. Enjoy the final. We can't wait to break this down with you afterwards. And for those of you listening out there, please post a comment, leave a review, like, subscribe, and of course, follow us on our social accounts, OTW_podcast. For now, Ali, we'll leave you be. Enjoy the game.